Individuals might be bookish and library-ish and all of that stuff, but the community can't, because this burden of jurisprudence is a social burden.
Yes.
And that's why this community is ultimately a social community.
Yeah.
And the purpose of the discipline is not to write and teach. Writing and teach is just how you maintain a discipline's continuity. But its purpose is to bring about particular institutions in the world. And that's why historically jurists have always been occupying a middle ground between society and between the political realm.
Right.
They were always outside of that space.
Yes.
Informing how the political has to function, how the social has to function, and leading a delicate dance between the two, so society can move forward in a particular way. So all I'll say right at the end of that is just that my current position I'm occupying now at National Zakat Foundation is a position I occupy out of conviction, which is that this is what this tradition calls to, is to bringing the institutions of the Sharia or the sacred law into the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Elevate podcast. My guest today is a genuine scholar. He's somebody who started off at Imperial, went to Oxford, and then ended up in Cambridge. So he has been educated at some of the finest establishments, or has taught at some of the finest establishments of education in the UK. So he specializes in Islamic legal theory, and he has a focus on Hanafi school of law. His doctoral thesis, which was fascinating if you read it, a theory of early legal Hanafism, legal epistemology in the Hidayah of Burhan al-Din Ali bin Abi Akbar al-Marghani. I think I said that name wrong. And he kind of worked in studies of interplay between rationality and tradition in major legal works. So he spent quite a lot of time in Jordan. He studied the full curriculum of Islamic sciences with traditional ulama. He was also the head of Arabic sciences at Qasid Arabic Institute in Amman. And he's somebody who had that classic kind of interplay between doing what his elders wanted and doing what he wanted, and he knew was his path. And he's a really interesting kind of conversation that we have around how he navigated that journey and how he kind of got to the place where he was going to be. And you know, through that journey, he was, like I said, he studied at Oxford. He then became a associate lecturer at Cambridge, and just recently he has started as the CEO of National Zakat Foundation. So of course you know who it is. It's Dr. Sohail Hanif. Here's the podcast. Alaikum Sohail, how's it going?
Walaikum assalam, rahmatullah, alhamdulillah, very well, thanks, and you?
How's your day going?
My day's going well. It's been busy.
Good. It's very sunny here in London today. So if you're watching in 2023 or 24 or
this is not normal. It just happened.
It's not normal. It's a very sunny. Yeah, it's a very sunny day in the end of March in London.
I've had to block out the sun. I have a window here, but it's so grey. I never have to worry about it. But for this call, I had to block it so that I wouldn't have sun on my forehead.
Yeah, I couldn't do that. So we're going to start off this conversation with a very weird tangent, but I'll tell you something about myself. I have an allergic reaction to sunlight.
Subhanallah.
Right. So I can't have the sunlight on my skin for more than about 10 minutes before I go bright red and itchy. And if it gets really bad, like my face will go like this. So it's crazy. And I wasn't born with it. It wasn't something that it just kind of happened in my late 20s. It's called solar urticaria, and it is literally. And I went to the hospital, and they said, yes, you might be allergic to kind of the spectrum of light, but then they did this massive machine. They put it on your back, and they kind of shine all the different spectrums of light onto your skin, ultraviolet, infrared, etc., etc. And they said, no, actually, you're literally allergic to visible light. And alhamdulillah, it's the luminosity of the sun which is strong enough to do it. Like, there's a light here now, and that's not enough to give me an allergic reaction. But we don't realize this, right? The luminosity of the sun is spectacularly higher than any light that we see in the normal world. Like if you on the iPhone, you have these luminosity kind of meters, and you'll see if you put it on your phone and your inside is like 200, and you take it outside, it's like 10,000. It's that much difference. It's crazy difference. So the sunlight is an amazing thing. My body, my physiology doesn't seem to like it. And I'm gonna do something really weird. I'm gonna go off a tangent. So at first I was very, oh my God, this is horrible. Why has this happened? How am I ever going to enjoy myself? How am I going to go outside? So it is like my skin is burning. And then someone once said to me, but alhamdulillah, if your skin's burning here, maybe that'll save you in something in the hereafter. And I was like, actually, this is a really good way of thinking about it, right? Because it might be that this little thing, which is, inconvenient and not nice and painful, might save me at some point. So make dua.
Allah protect all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Sorry, as I said, we've gone into a tangent straight off the bat there. So obviously you've not seen many of these because I haven't released them properly yet. But you'll see one of the kind of key things I like to do is really get an idea of your story, and I think is to introduce the people listening to who you are. And I think the best way of doing that is to kind of go back and understand something about where you grew up, family, that sort of thing. So were you born in London?
No, if you're going to start from there, it's going to be a long story.
No, it can be as long as it needs to be.
Because what happened was my dad came to England in the 60s, and my brothers, who are significantly older than me, were born here.
Right.
By my time, my dad had an opposite age to yours, perhaps, in the sense that I think being away from this grey weather was more desirable.
Right.
And he worked in petroleum. And so I was actually born in Iran at the just about the time of the revolution. So at the end of 78, I lived in Iran for only 1 month because basically everything was closing up and was an emergency last flight arranged by the embassy to get the last people out. And so I have no memories.
Right.
But it is on my passport permanently that I'm born in Iran.
Wow. So do your parents, how long were they in Iran?
Oh my goodness, I'm going to get this one wrong. I'm going to say 2 to 4 years, but I'll have to check my facts.
Do they talk about that period? Because Iran is like, at least in terms of our kind of media portrayal of it, a kind of really tough place. So I've always want to hear about people who are from there or have lived there.
Yeah, definitely. I'll bring my dad in for your next show. I think he'll have a lot of stories. But if you want the short and sweet of it, yeah, they loved it. They loved the people. They loved the language.
Right.
They loved the sights, the food. Later in my life, I lived in Jordan.
Yeah.
And they found a lot of similarity in the climate, the hilliness, the people, the food, and so no, definitely it was a very positive and a very good experience.
So you moved back to the UK in 78 when you were
a little bit complicated, man, because so this emergency flight, I can't, again, I'm going to show my ignorance now, but it went to Pakistan, and we stayed in Pakistan for 2 years.
Right.
And then after that, my dad had some job in Libya doing a very important project.
Wow.
Your dad really gets oil production. Yeah, exactly. Someone said, someone at that talk said, "What does your dad do? Does he instigate global revolution?"
He's like, I go, no, after he went to Iran, Libya, then he went to Iraq, then Syria. Now he's in Ukraine.
Then I was like, no, don't worry. After Libya, he went to England. Right. And the dude goes, probably he's on his way to Northern Ireland, probably, because that was like back then.
Yeah, true. The 80s.
But the adventure stopped in Libya, fortunately for the stories. There was an Iraq possibility at one stage, because what happened was we came back to England. So for them it was coming back, for me it was coming too. When I was about 4 years old is when we moved, the family moved back to the UK.
Right.
And I did my primary school all in the UK.
Right.
And then come secondary school time, again, my dad had this opportunity to take us overseas.
Right.
my brothers were significantly older. They ended up staying here. And so the option at that time was actually Iraq or Doha. There were two opportunities then. But then we went for Doha. So I did all of my secondary school in Doha, Qatar. All of it.
That's so cool.
Until A levels.
Right. And what's your kind of overarching memory of Doha? What's it?
It's so funny and so silly as well. It's so childish as well. But whenever I want to summarize the lifestyle, I talk about buffet desserts, because for me, it's just like when you have a spread of every kind of cream caramel and cake and I don't know what and Ali and whatever. Never experienced that in my growing up in England.
Right.
That you could go to a spread with so much dessert on it.
Yeah.
And that's what I always say. If you think of the buffet dessert and think of a lifestyle.
Right, it is a buffet dessert. Right. It's
a very, very different kind of lifestyle. I'm probably as fat as I am now. But the other thing that was funny was Qatar was going through its own sort of transition. Obviously, it's a very major player right now in so many ways. But back then, there was only one TV channel. It started at 4 PM.
Right.
There was no TV all day long, basically.
Right.
And then 4 PM, it starts always with Quranic recital.
Right.
And then a 10-minute religious lecture.
Yeah.
And then the TV starts, and it closes at like 12. So you have about 8 hours of TV every day.
Might not be a bad thing, to be honest. It might be good for productivity if they did that here as well, maybe.
So yeah, so that was also interesting. It's interesting because it's funny, this idea of, if we're going to have TV, make sure the kids finish school first.
Yeah.
And make sure there's a bit of religion, and then we'll do some programs here.
Slot that in up front.
And it's funny because as a kid, I would watch this religion thing, waiting for the shows to start. And so, for example, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, whom I came across later in my teenage years, he had a show back then, which he recorded when he was very young in the Emirates, and no one knows about this show. Like, he's wearing this tea towel cloth, and his name on the show is Hamza bin Sahnoon bin Yusuf. It's got all this sort of like, again, I don't know the backstory, but they had this funny name.
Yeah.
And he's going through the 40 hadith, but that was really popular. And I asked him in later years, when I was 17, 18, when I met him and spent a lot of time with him back then. And so he said he recorded that very early on when he was in the Emirates.
Yeah.
And apparently someone else was going to be doing it, and he gave him advice about speaking to the camera, and then in the end that he gave this. But yeah, this was quite a big show actually when I was growing up, the Sheikh Hamza Yusuf 40 Hadith show.
That man, so he's one of my dream people to speak to on this, but we can talk about that at some point. And there's, I think Sheikh Yasir said something about him. He said he has been doing this for far longer than people realize, right? He's He's dedicated so much of his life to dawah and to trying to spread the word of Islam, and just the amount of respect that he deserves for doing that is phenomenal. Because no one's perfect. No one's does everything perfectly. But if you listen to him, you go, this guy's heart is amazing. There's no doubt about that. He's amazing. So what kind of stuff did you enjoy at school, I suppose? And so there's two questions about this Qatari lifestyle that you had, this opulent lifestyle of desserts and buffets. So the two questions are, what was school like? And then what did you do in your kind of for fun? I mean, did you play football, cricket? What sort of stuff did you get up to?
In terms of the sports, it was tennis and basketball.
Right. Okay, that's very good.
An important friendship I had back then, which maybe you can come onto your show at some point, was that I made a friend in the first year of secondary school called Hamza Karamali.
I know who
and that became a very important friendship for me. So I always have to say this, by the way.
His brother is amazing.
Yeah. So we were both 11 then. He had just come from Pakistan, I think.
Right.
Yeah, in so many ways, because in later years, so many ways actually reminding me as well. I should message him after this. Because it's in later years, I would remark how important it is to have good friends.
Yes.
Because it's, parents take you definitely to a particular point.
Yeah.
But there's a journey that they're not always going to be there with you on, and nor is it for them to be there, which is your own journey. It's your own sort of production of, you know, becoming yourself. And at that stage, there's nothing that will determine or influence you more than your company. And so I would reflect on that a lot, especially with this particular friendship, which I found very, very important for me in so many ways.
There's a really interesting point there. There's a saying or a proverb which I really like. It's when you're with someone, either they're affecting you or you're affecting them, right? And I think one of the ways that young people can analyze, because it's not easy, right? There's no, when you were kind of with Hamza, you weren't sitting there going, "Oh, is this guy good for me or not?" And I don't do that, right? You don't necessarily sit there and go, "Oh, is this person good for me or not?" Especially when you're 15, 16. But a really good way of analyzing is that sentence, which is, hold up, is this person influencing me to be good, or am I influencing them to be good, right? Because that should be the, you know, there should be, if we think about success in terms of, like as Muslims, we would think about it in terms of spirituality and deen, and then probably relationships with either our family or friends or wider. And then we'd probably think about kind of maybe mental health, physical health, some sort of maybe monetary would be in there somewhere, that kind of monetary success. And I think in all of those arenas, a good way of thinking of this is this person affecting those things? And if so, are they affecting them positively or negatively? And in your case, you were very lucky to have someone like Hamza around.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, very, very simple things like praying 5 times a day. It was quite funny as well, because he did it with a one-liner. It's a one-liner I don't approve of using things like that, but it worked on me. It's funny, we have a theory on what makes good da'wah, but it's not always the theory that actually affected us ourselves. I've seen this a lot. This sort of disconnect between our theory of things and actually a reflection on our own lives. So what happened was, you know, when you're young, the easiest thing to do is fasting. It's hard, but it's your mark of growing up. You're just dying to fast.
Yes, this is true.
And so I was 11 or 12, I don't know, one of the two. And he was like, you know, if you don't pray, your fast don't count. That was it. That was like the one-liner, right? And I'm like, I would never ever approve of speaking like this to someone who's fasting, because it's like you want to encourage it and you want to encourage more. You don't want to say, oh, don't bother with that.
You're locked in.
Like that. Yeah.
You're locked in.
But it worked. That was it. And that was the game over. It was really straightforward.
And actually, it's psychologically, there's this concept of, you know, when you invest money into something, you don't want to then do anything that might make you lose that money, right? So you're always going to, even if you think, hold on, things are going down, you want to, because you're invested, you want to then continue to be. Exactly. And it's a similar concept, right? Because you're invested in the fast, you're like, well, I don't want to lose this, so I might as well now pray as well, because that will ensure that I don't lose it. That's actually really good. Yeah, that works.
Many, many different things.
Not exactly positive, but it worked.
Yeah, exactly. And anyway, many little things when you're growing up. Anyway, it's my biggest advice to anyone is your circle of friends is all that you are. And so it really is a blessing. It's quite funny as well, because in later years, so there's 2 other things now. It's funny now. It's all going to become the Hamza podcast, which I'm narrating now. But what happened was there was some other, probably the single most significant event in my entire life, as far as I can see, in terms of the trajectory that I took thereafter, was a 1-month program in Nottingham in 1996, and I was 17 years old back then.
Right.
And I was very impressionable, young, whatever you want to call this thing, right? And again, it was led on by Hamza, because Hamza had gone on to Canada back then after GCSEs. I stayed on in Doha for the A-levels. And then he said, I'm coming to England for this 1-month course, and why don't you come and we can hang out? And I never heard of any of these people. Hamza Yusuf was there, but I didn't know he was the same as Hamza Ben Sahnoun Ben Yusuf, who I used to watch on TV, but I didn't make that connection, didn't know who he was.
Of course not, yeah.
And a few other people, you know, Sheikh Nukella, I didn't know I didn't know anybody, I didn't know nothing. The funny thing was, it's quite funny, because then I applied and they accepted me on the program, and it's August 1996. I'm 17 years old, and I remember this instructions they sent the organizers: bring an alarm clock, bring this, like going camping, you know, bring this, bring that. And it was like one of them was bring a mushaf. I never heard this word in my whole life.
Right. Yes.
So I especially called the guy up.
Yeah.
And the person I'm calling the guy, sorry, that's disrespectful. He's a very major sheikh in Darya as well, which is Sheikh Ibrahim Osiifa in Liverpool. You got to have him on.
Right. Okay.
That's like done. You got to have him on. So I called him up. I don't know who he is. And I said, sorry, what's a mushaf? Because I can't read this word, right? I don't know what this mushaf is, and I have to bring it, and I don't want to be rejected. I didn't bring my camping list. So he obviously explained that's the Quran. I said, why not just say Quran? Why make this? I couldn't figure out. Bring a mushaf, right? So it's just funny, just to show that very young, very impressionable, very trying to figure things out. But that was the single most powerful experience of my entire life. There's no doubt about it. To this day, whatever I'm up to is influenced by that.
Actually, what did you do, and then what effect did it have? I suppose those are two questions.
Yeah, it's so tricky. So it was a 1 month course. It was a 1 month intensive residential course, introducing us to what you might call neo-traditionalism, if you want to label it now, because we have labels for everything now.
Yeah,
at that time, it was an introduction to traditional Islamic studies. It was the first time me entering this space of seeking knowledge as an activity to be cherished. Never heard of that before.
Right. Yeah.
And then the idea that there are disciplines in seeking knowledge, never heard of that before.
Right.
And then the idea that there's a great tradition of learning that we have to connect to. That notion.
Yep.
I can't describe it in words, but you're young and you're finding yourself in the world. Prior to that, it's a funny thing. Prior to that, the closest thing I had to a sort of thinking about Islam in a bigger way was actually HT leaflets. I'd come across HT leaflets and I was never part of a group because I was in Doha for myself, and I was young. So there was no group dynamics, but there were leaflets and tapes.
Right.
So that was the first time we think about Islam as a global phenomenon with a global purpose.
Yes. Yes.
That's the one thing I had going into this experience. But beyond that, I had nothing, on my radar, if you like. And so,
and I think, is this a Pakistani phenomenon? So the two things that you said, which I feel like are Pakistani phenomenon, and by Pakistani, I don't mean people in Pakistan. I mean here, Pakistanis that migrated. First thing is that we have this very specific, I was going to use the word limited, but that's probably unfair. Specific view of education, which is now I think changing, which was get educated to get a good job, right? This is the basic view, and I think especially here, people of our age, Islam was the thing that we do in the mosque or at home, and it wasn't this global historical socioeconomic phenomenon that we know it is, and actually far greater socioeconomic. I've actually limited it there, but it's a much bigger thing than we took that we understood. And I think it's only now people are in the last probably 20 years have started to go, actually we don't know enough about our own history and what are the things that we did in the past and what are the things that we achieved and why that was that. I think that's changed quite a lot recently, inshallah, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And so, you know what? I don't talk much about this whole HT phenomenon, but because again, I was never part of the group as such. But it just these conversations at some stage they are formative.
They are.
As you're thinking about identity, place, world, justice. Is there such a thing as injustice in the world? Is there such a thing as a way a world ought to be? Again, when you're growing up, that's not a conversation that people have.
It's just the way the world is, right?
There's correct. And so obviously, sorry, that going into the Pakistani element, we grew up with elders always talking about politics all the time.
Right.
But it's not the same as a moral view of the way a world ought to be in a grounded way. All you see is snippets of, politician criticism, if you like. But there's So definitely that's formative without a doubt. But that was me again coming into this space. So the idea of tradition, I was going to say, it's hard to put it into words. This moment when you realize that A, there's learning, there's a culture of learning, B, what the culture of learning can offer you, but C, this notion of being connected, that there are great figures. Again, great figures weren't on my map. There's such a thing as great figures, great places, greatness. Maybe greatness is a word, the idea that you can tap into a heritage. Heritage is a word
Right.
that you can be a part of through engaging in this culture of learning.
Yep.
And then you hear people talking about their teachers. And this was, again,
Right.
so when you talk to Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, now he's there, he's talking about his teachers in the desert. He talks about them a lot.
Yeah, he does.
The way they are and what that's like and what they represent. And then you feel connected to something great outside of this world, but it's present in the world and it connects to something in the past, and the key to it is learning. And that equation, yeah, it knocks you for six. I mean, I can't put it into words.
There's something in there about the fact that our tradition has this idea of ijaza, right? So anybody who doesn't understand, ijaza essentially means permission for one. It means literally means permission, right? But it's, people can say, I have ijaza, and they can give you a long list of names and connect that finally to the Prophet Muhammad, right? And no one else can do that. No other tradition can go back 1500 years and go, here is the reason I know this, and my proof of it is all of these people were taught by this person. And that kind of connection doesn't exist in any other place. I mean, you know, these great big fancy universities, they have reams and reams and archives and all this sort of stuff, but they don't have that direct connection. I don't think they have that direct connection. And I think there is something about that heritage. And as children, us not understanding that, even as adults, we don't necessarily understand where that comes from. And that idea of traditionalism or neo-traditionalism is hugely important. And I think there was a moment there where people went, oh, we don't need this. We need to go back to Quran Sunnah. And that's correct. That's not incorrect. But you can't throw away 1400 years of learning.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you remind me of this in Surah Al-Waqi'ah. It talks about on Judgment Day, there's three people, three groups, if you like. There's the outrunners who outrun everybody. They're like the foremost of humanity. Surah calls them the Sabiqun. Right. And then there's the generality, good people and not good people. You know, people who get the book in the right hand and the book in the left hand. So there's three groups, but there's one special group called the outrunners. They just run, they beat everyone basically in the race to the pleasure of God. And then the surah says those outrunners are very many from those who've gone before, and they are few from those who come after. Right. Now, people have different interpretations of what that means. You know, is it those who came before in Islamic history, those who came before Islam? You know, it's various things people interpret as. But just what strikes me in this is just that if you're looking to be an outrunner or an outstripper, it's not going to come. Sorry, outstripper. That sounds like to outrun everyone. Yeah, it's not going to come by looking at what's happening around you. Yeah, it's going to come by looking by looking at the achievements of those who have gone now. Yeah. And if you do look back, you'll find a whole army of people that you can follow. You'll find all kinds of, you'll find prophets, and you'll find saintly figures, and you'll find scholars, and you'll find warriors, and you'll find kings, and you'll find the philanthropists. You'll find all kinds of people who devoted themselves to a sincere devotion to God and to people, and who've done great things. And you'll find so if you are willing to look back, there's no shortage of role models.
I think,
and if you don't look back, then you might not know what it is to have a role model.
So I really like this guy called Ryan Holiday, who is an American writer, and initially he was into kind of very much marketing, and then still does some business stuff, and then kind of goes wider than that. And he's a huge proponent of the Stoic philosophers, especially the Romans, with Marcus Aurelius and Seneca and those sorts of people. And I think, yeah, this is great. This is some really interesting thinking. And I think it's a real shame that at the moment people like us can't point to our Marcus Aurelius's and Senecas and all of the other huge number of people in our tradition who are just amazing. But we don't have those biographies of those books in English yet. And I think once we do, we will really begin to see, oh, actually, these people said and did amazing things, but the Western world doesn't know about them because, unfortunately, the Western world is obviously not unfortunately, it's based in English, right? And I think there's a real need for that. Even the biographies of someone like Hazrat Umar, who is never mentioned by any Western commentator in the great generals or the great leaders, forget generals, the great leaders, you know, they talk about Alexander, and they might, you know, if they're particularly enlightened, they might talk about Cyrus or Cyrus, or, you know, they might talk about Julius Caesar, or they might talk about later people will talk about Churchill and Napoleon and what's his name, Nelson. But actually, these people can't compare with what Hazrat Umar did. This is a guy who was coming out of the desert with the simplest clothing, the simplest equipment, and just spread this identity across half the new known world.
Yeah.
And it's like no one knows about this guy. In terms of leaders, of normal people, you know, let's not talk about prophets except for a minute, but normal people, how's he not right at the top?
Yeah.
And it's just we don't know. We don't have that education, unfortunately. We don't have it, let alone kind of non-Muslim people having it.
You just reminded me of the importance of storytelling, which we don't do enough of. There was a time, you know, when I had a website. I don't know if it even exists anymore. I've not even gone there. But at the time, it was called harraq.com anyway. It has its own history. And I was going to do storytelling there, just biographies.
Right.
But that never took off. But you just reminded me that biographies and stories and just histories, they're very important. They're very, very formative.
This is kind of what I'm doing here. I want my conversations here to be the stories about the people that I'm talking to, right? And from those stories, you know, inshallah, principles, practices, thinking, ideas, you know, visions, missions, those sorts of things start coming out when we have these conversations. So, you know, that's definitely something that I'm trying to do. So let's go back to when you're 17 for a minute. Did you have in your mind then, right, I want to go down this path of...
So like I said, it was this one moment, it was this 1 month, but my life was never the same after that 1 month. To this day, these books, which I can't claim to have read, you know, we'll have to talk about them at some point. But the point is, what they represent is a particular relationship with this culture of learning.
Right.
And I've never stopped that since then. And it was a sort of one track, a sort of movement out of that. And all that's happened over the years is different ways that I've decided that I relate to this culture of learning.
Right.
That's actually all that's changed, is how I wish to relate to it, what it means to me to be true to it, what it means to have this because at the end of the day, a culture of learning, like I've summarized it to you, it's a connection with people and with a tradition.
Yes.
And so all you do over time is you just realize, well, what is the significance of this connection? How do I relate to it? What does it mean to me?
Right.
And what does it mean to what I have to be doing here? So all I can tell you, anything I'll tell you now, from anything to the end of our chat now or any future chats, is just different ways of configuring my relationship.
Right.
With this journey that starts in that very, very eventful moment. It was quite funny. I was talking about being impressionable. So it's like, I don't know what, again, my connection with Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, for example, is one of the 4 teachers there, but obviously he's a prominent figure there.
Very prominent, yeah.
I only was there on the summer course 96, 97, 98. So I did the summer course 3 times. Twice in Nottingham, which were the hardcore ones.
Yeah.
You know, hardcore training, teaching, and whatever you want to call it. There was one in Fez, which was a bit more relaxed. There's a bit more sightseeing-y type of element to it.
Right, it was a bit more fun, yeah.
Whereas this was more like a washing machine of yourself. You know, it was a complete tumble, you know, these two. So, and I've never met him since then, 98. I've never had an exchange. So it's just, those were the 3 years, those 3-month periods. But in those days, anyway, he was ultra anti-TV.
Yeah.
Like ultra.
Right.
And so it's quite funny. So I stopped watching movies for 18 years as a result of that. A few other, again, influences as well. Sheikh Nukella was there. Obviously, he was very anti-TV as well.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by saying, it was a powerful movement. Because if you imagine just to, you know,
just
stop
to spend
watching
time
TV
with 2 people like that, right?
It was definitely I don't know what you call it, washing dryer, tumble dryer, I don't know what it was of a moment for me.
So then did you go from there to uni? What because obviously you was kind of A-level time then.
So I went back to Doha after 96, finished off my A-levels. That was my second year of A-levels. came back to, I did another summer course in 97, and then I started uni.
Right. And what did you do at uni?
So at uni I did, and it was not by great passion, information systems engineering.
Right. That was useful to you in your life of Islamic education. I'm so sure it was. So did your parents influence you to go down this road?
It's so bad no, they didn't force me to go down this road.
Right.
But the weirdest thing was I was one of those kids that never knew what they wanted to do when they grew up. I could never say fireman, policeman,
so many of them,
soldier. I don't know what the usual ones were, but neither I only knew one thing. I didn't want to be a doctor, and that's very sad. I feel sorry to say that as well, and that's only because I was not a rebellious kid. I think if you ask my parents. But there's a bit of rebellion that has to be in every human being, I guess. So I knew my mum wanted me to be a doctor. So I said, you know what? The one thing in life is I'm not going to be a doctor.
I'm not going to be a doctor.
And it was so strong, this one sense of decision, of purpose that I had, is that I didn't take A-level biology, although I liked biology, just so that I could close the door off for being a doctor.
Wow.
There was one active decision I did about my career was to not do biology.
Wow, that is very rebellious. That is
and in
amazing.
later years I regret, because I think I would have enjoyed it actually, but my brother has the same regret.
It's a hard job.
It's a hard job.
It is
but
mentally and physically very difficult.
For sure.
And I don't mean becoming a doctor. I mean being a doctor is hard, right?
Okay.
People don't think about that. So they think, you know, you have to do all the exams and you have to learn this and you have to be able to get into uni and do this and that. That's kind of difficult. But I think that people don't realize that you have to deal with potentially people, their bodies, their minds, and trying to help them get better, and in some cases not getting better and dying. That is not a thing that at least people like me deal with on a day-to-day basis. You know, we deal with, oh, is the contract in? Is the invoice sorted? Have they paid us? You know, it's pretty basic stuff in terms of the complexities of life. So I think people don't kind of
talk like you live with doctors, or you have very intimate connection.
I have had some time in hospitals. I suppose that's why.
Okay.
And I think, you know, you do realize, wow, these people have a very tough job, because, you know, everybody else who kind of has difficult times like that has then time to grieve. No one else has to then go back to work and then go, right, Mr. Smith, how can I help you?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, that's I have so much respect for that more than anything else.
Yeah.
So then,
there was no decision. It was just I didn't know what to do, and then I obviously need to do something that has a career in it. And my brother did this, and he said, "Yeah, just do this. It'll be good." And so I just did it. It was one of those very weird dining table conversations of what should I do with my life? Let's quickly sort it out and let's get these applications going off.
We've got 15 minutes.
It was one of them.
Let's bang it out before lunch.
Exactly.
Oh, that's brilliant. So
obviously,
then
we come from a sciences family, so my levels were all physics, chemistry, maths. So already that was a limitation. There was no door towards any cultural sort of exploration of humanities. It was hard sciences, and so what comes out of this?
Right. And then so you did that. Which uni did you go to?
I went to Imperial. So I'm going to move this board. Remember I said there's this odd sunlight.
Your head's getting hot.
Block the sunlight. Yeah, exactly.
Has that helped?
I think so. Just really for you. Really, it was more of a visual.
No, it's fine. You look good.
Like, you know, if I get, you know, anyway, something like that. So the uni was Imperial.
Right. How did you find that? Central London.
Yeah, it was a very strange period in my life, and it's all because of these what I'm going to call these summer courses. I've called them summer courses. If you want to give them a name, they were called the Rihla courses.
Oh, I heard of the Rihla courses.
Yeah, but that's before they were focused on being in nice eastern locations, if you like.
Right, before the, you know,
was just
Turkey and...
It was just hardcore, unexciting location, morning to evening sort of study and discipline, and, you know. So there's a very particular mood that they had. I don't think is the same.
It was quite a serious mood.
Yeah. And
you're not here to enjoy yourself.
The focus is you're here to, you know, you're here to utterly change.
So at what point then did you go, right, this is all well and good, IT systems are great? IT systems
were never great. They were never great for me, because what happened was I unfortunately started this degree having done, again, 2 of these Rihla courses. And so in my imagination, this is what I call immaturity, right? I'm meant to be in Syria doing Arabic. Why am I here in London doing this thing? And so I could not concentrate for 3 years.
Right.
Every term I said, okay, I'll try now, but I just couldn't do it. And so I got through this degree just by the one skill I learned wasn't computer programming. It was the skill of how to cram information during the Easter holidays and pass your exams.
Right.
And how to work backwards from past papers to figure out what the answer probably would have been.
All so useful in real life situations.
Well, it's a sort of problem solving, which is this. I did develop new techniques of how I can't explain it. So there were definitely lifelong techniques I learned, but they weren't computer programming. That's all.
They weren't computer programming.
And all of my free time, I'm just trying to learn Arabic.
Right.
And it's quite funny as well. So Sheikh Hamza Yusuf had this technique of learning Arabic that everyone wrote off. And they wrote off because it was all based on grammar, dictionary, reading, and then self-study. Everyone wrote it off because it didn't really look like it worked, because there's no homework, there's no TA, there's 30 students, there's a 1 month cramming of grammar, just this grammar theory.
Right.
How do you learn Arabic off the back of this? And I feel like I'm one of the 1 or 2 or 3 people that it actually worked.
You actually worked with.
Because for those 4 years, I didn't have a teacher, or the 3 years. But in all my free time, I'm just trying to read Arabic, look up a word, memorize this, try that. But it's just a self-practice, self-placed task.
I have to ask you. You spent all this time in Qatar, right? So did you not learn any Arabic?
No, because Qatar is just English, and then Urdu helps with these. You know, if you go to taxi driver or in a grocery store. Arabic you only need if you get arrested, if you have to go to the police office or something.
So how do you say? I'm not doing anything? I actually might need to learn that. Last time I was in Medina, I was arrested.
Oh no!
Right. So, you know where Jannat al-Baqi is, right?
Yeah.
There's a ramp that goes up, and then you go into the graveyard. So it's my wife and myself, and we're walking towards the Jannat al-Baqi, and she says, "I'm not going to go." Either they don't let. It was time that they didn't let women go in, or she said, "I'm not going to go in." So she said, "Okay, you take the baby and you go into the graveyard, and I'll just walk around a bit." So I'm starting to walk towards the graveyard.
They thought you stole someone's baby.
Well, I don't know what he said, because he said it in Arabic. So this guy mustachioed guy with a pot belly kind of went to me, "Come hada," which is not obviously the right word. Come hada just means how much is it? So he said something to me, and I went, "What?" And he said, "No, you can't take the kid." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And then I just stopped, because I'm like, "Okay, what am I going to do now?" Because I wanted to go into the graveyard, but someone's gone off. So I'm standing there, and he starts going, no, move. I'm like, "Dude, I'm just standing. Give me a minute. Let me work out." He did not like that. He did not like my British.
Dude, I don't think that's being called a dude, man.
He didn't like being called a dude. I was like, "Hey, dude." And he kind of did this with his moustache and got annoyed. And then I got annoyed, if I'm honest, which I shouldn't have done. And he went, "Move." And I went, "No, why should I move?" The Western attitude doesn't work with the Arabs. They didn't like that. He didn't like that at all. And he went, "Right, you're coming with me. You're nicked my old China." Kind of grabbed me like this. At that point, I got very annoyed, and then took me downstairs, and he went, "Where are you from?" And he said something like Indian or Pakistani, which I was like, "No, actually, I'm from England."
That doesn't work.
He didn't like that either. He was like, "No, mate, you're brown. I don't care. You cannot be from England, because people from England are not brown." Yeah, so then he took me downstairs, and there was one of the student sheikhs who was obviously from Pakistan, who came downstairs and go, which means, "Hey, bro, please just tell him where you're from." And I went, "Look, I'm from England. There's no point in me telling him I'm from Pakistan, because I don't have a Pakistani passport. They don't know me." And he went, "Oh, okay." And he went, "Listen, you just need to do what they tell you to do." And I went, "Okay." And then he let me go. But yeah, it can be. You do. I think if I'd learned Arabic, or I knew some Arabic, that would have been an easier situation to deal with. So at what point then did you really begin the journey of kind of Islamic education?
So like I said, it just started then, because in all my free time, I'm trying to learn Arabic, right? And then that goes in its own journey. So like by the end of my degree, so halfway through the degree, I start trying to read unveiled Arabic. It's all reading Arabic, right? It's not like spoken Arabic. but I can't describe it, but it just clicked. I can't put it into words,
Right.
but at some point I could pick up these books and read them. I can't describe how that process actually works, because
Right. It's one of the
the way
great
Arabic works, for those who don't know, it's like the letters aren't voweled and the grammar is in the vowelling and the pronunciation is there, the meaning is there, right?
Yeah.
And so it's the most awesome puzzle. It's like an enigma. It's like one of those Alan Turing kind of puzzles. It's like you've got a bunch of variations. That's why I said maybe there's some generic tools for my engineering that help. For me, it was
Right.
more like a mathematical puzzle. You've got these variations, you've got these
It
possibilities.
could be one of these things, yeah.
And then as you get your experience, you realize how to knock off the variables. And
Right.
so over time, then you start memorizing things and you get the variables and you get used to, so something clicks at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've reached a critical mass of boiling down the variables and your vocabulary is built up.
Right.
And that's on the level of a reading ability. And so by the time I went to Jordan, which we obviously haven't come to, I could already sit in a full immersion Arabic class, studying a classical Arabic text, and just be complete parallel with the other students who have gone through to like a university setting.
Right. Right.
All from the self-study. And I can't put it into
Wow.
words, but it clicked at some point.
So you knew the grammar, you knew enough vocab, and you kind of stuck.
And I was sticking to a particular genre of text, which are these
Right.
medieval Islamic knowledge texts.
Right. So
either to do
therefore
with
your
fiqh or to do
vocab
with
was
grammar.
around.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. So that's why the hardest thing in Jordan for me was speaking to kids,
Right.
because kids don't do anything formal, and I
Right.
can't communicate with them.
So they would, the English equivalent would be, they would be saying, "Yo, fam, what up?" or
And
something.
I'm like saying, "Who art thou?" You
Who
know?
art thou?
They're like, "What?"
Wherefore art thou?
So yeah, so the day-to-day Arabic took a while to pick up, and still I have my own struggles on that. So it was a very odd, it was a grammar-led, reading-led approach, but by the end of the self-taught, except for these summer courses of the grammar intensive, but by the end of it, yes, I was able to speak and listen and join an Arabic studies class and do my studies. So it's one of those amazing things, which so in later years, I just told, when I tell people, I always tell people, learn Arabic. It doesn't matter how you start, but make sure you do it as a labor of love. That's all.
Right.
that matters. So work with texts that excite you, do what excites you, memorize what excites you, and as soon as you're bored, just stop.
Right.
So the idea is you just approach it through love and passion.
Yeah.
Make projects for yourself in
Yeah.
areas that are interesting. And every little bit you learn is going to help you. Every little bit of Arabic you learn, you will feel it. That's my summary on the Arabic side.
That's amazing. So okay, so it's 2002-ish. You've learned some Arabic.
I graduate in 2000 actually.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
Then I take a year off.
Right.
And then I take off.
What did you do in that year?
Yeah, what happened was I had this illness.
Oh, okay.
I developed this. I guess I should be open, isn't it? Because you started with your own. So I developed this autoimmune condition at the end of my second year. So this is in 1998, summertime.
Right.
And so that's all I'll say. It was fairly serious autoimmune condition. They treated it with a light combination of chemotherapy and steroids.
Wow.
So that was in my third year. So in my third year at university, I was doing various forms of treatment.
Wow.
And
that must have been so scary.
Yeah, it was fine. It was fine. I guess it's I think I was fortunate as well that by that time I'd, what we've talked about, role models, tradition,
right.
what you're after and what you're on. And so for all of that, I found a lot of comfort and support, really. So I wouldn't say within myself that it was, I wouldn't say all I'll say is it was fine. Like it was okay. The whole period was fine. My face really ballooned, by the way, at that time, because I was on the steroids. And
did you get big muscles?
No, unfortunately not.
That's a shame.
It wasn't those steroids. Yeah, I know. For the young people, whenever you said this, I'm on steroids, I'm like, okay. So
I'm gonna be jacked.
And so what's funny was I actually got a job with IBM as an IT consultant. Surprisingly, they didn't know that my skill is cramming for exams. It's not really programming for your clients. But thankfully, I did whatever, in those days, but it's the same now, isn't it? When you do a graduate job scheme, it's more about some global skills that they're looking for more than your technical
yeah,
skills.
This is true.
So I did find, building a Lego tower, working with a team to solve X issue, and actually worked out fine. And, so I actually got this job. And then I asked him for a year off because I was going through this treatment and illness. And so then we took a year off. During that year, they were very nice. They even increased the salary by like 1,500. They said we've now increased our graduate scheme. But then at the end of that year, I said, sorry, I'm not coming now. That's when I started my Jordan journey. So during that year, two things happened. So during that year off, it was just to give me a chance to recover as well. And then again, I talk about Hamza comes in different points in my story. So in that point of my story, I met him during that one summer and he was memorizing the Quran.
Right.
And I said, you know what? I want to do that too. Right. So that's what I spent that year on. It was a year primarily devoted to Quranic memorization.
That's amazing. And you were what, 22?
After no, what 21ish? Yeah, 21, 22.
This is a really interesting point, right? So I am a lot older than that now, and I feel like I don't know enough Quran by heart. And I always thought to myself that if you don't learn by the time you're kind of 15, 16, you're never really going to learn it off by heart, by rote. But it feels like it's still possible to do that when you're older.
Without a doubt. I mean, I always give the example of my mother, actually. So like later on, so I'm sorry, I know I'm fast forwarding, but maybe, so later on I became an online teacher for Islamic studies at a place called Sunni Path. We might have to backtrack and forward track again, but there was a student there from Bosnia who sadly passed away a few years ago from an illness. I mean, Allah have mercy on him. And his name was his name was Ja'far, and he was older. But by older, probably I'm guessing 40s. I don't think he was that much older, really.
Right. Yeah.
And his thing was, he emailed me once. He emailed me once, said, am I too old to start learning Arabic? This is exactly what he said. And I said, hang on, my mum is doing it. It's her absolute passion in life. And she's like, at the time, I don't know, probably 60s, probably at the time. And I said, it's given her so much sharpness and meaning and focus. And it means so much to her, but there's no oldness in this. And that guy, he later on took these online Arabic courses and he became a teacher for that online institution teaching Arabic. Wow. And then my mum also went on, and even now, in later years, which is so hard, to do tajweed. Tajweed is the hardest thing, right? Yeah. Hardest thing in tajweed is you show up, you think, okay, I can do this. And then you can't say Bismillah, like the it's like you can't even do that.
Your mouth is not used to moving those ways.
Because we think the hard thing is Ain, but actually it is the Bismillah, Bismillah. Just getting the simple Kesra right is the hard thing. So tajweed is this thing of learning how to recite the Quran properly. It breaks you to pieces. You think you know what you're doing, and it just
Like I remember, I struggled with, and I gave up. I struggled with lam because coming from England.
Oh yeah.
Punjabi la is a very la, right? It's la, and my teacher who was, I think he was Jordanian, lovely guy, by Sheikh Ali Barakat, and he would always say no, Wasim, la, and I'm like la, just like I can't do this. What do you mean la? It's one of those funny conversations where it is difficult for you to change the way that your mouth moves, right?
It is, but I'm saying, look, my mum spent a lot of energy on that in her later years. She teaches tajweed to ladies. She's part of a Quranic memorization group, and just I think a few years ago she memorized all of Surah Al-Baqarah, and I think last year she finished Surah Ali Imran. And all of this is now, we're talking about 70s, mid to, we're talking about going on in years.
Yeah.
And so all I'm saying is, to all the kids watching at home, if you're not 70, you're a kid.
Even if you are 70, you can still do it.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you are 70, you're not a kid. But what I'm trying to say is there's no end point. There's no point when you can't start. And it's not just that, it's an incredible journey. It's just so it's enriching, it's fulfilling. It's just a journey. It's not a process. You just start it, and it takes you places. Learning Arabic, whether it's a recitation, whether it's a memorization, it will always give back to you. So definitely 100%.
So you started learning, you started memorizing the Quran with Hamza.
No, I didn't start with him. He just inspired me because he was doing it back
right.
then. I thought, all right, I want to do this too. Yeah.
How long did that take you? A whole year?
Yeah, so
year. That's like not amazing.
Unfortunately, you know, yeah, I mean, am I a hafiz? I mean, I don't use that word because I don't think I did it properly. Again, it was through the self-taught thing, right? So what happened was, when that year came in, I'd already memorized actually 5 ajza from the end, because I'd done some memorizing up until that stage.
Yeah.
Then I did this sprint for 1 year, and I actually did memorize all of the Holy Quran.
Right.
And I had a teacher as well, who halfway through I used to read to every day. So there was no teacher.
Right.
I used to read to him. He was a very, very special and blessed man as well. He was the Imam of my local mosque. And he also passed away, Maulana Manzoor Hussaini, may Allah have mercy on him, on Hajj, and he's buried in the Baqi', to the best of my knowledge. And so I used to read to him as well. But the idea was, it was a fast-paced movement, and it would have been fine. It was a perfectly well-planned idea if I just spent the last 6 months in consolidation once I finished. But that never happened.
Yes, you're right.
Because at that stage, a new change happened in my life, which was the year had passed. And by that stage, I think, you know, I think my father at that stage had come round to the idea that my health is the most, I mean, obviously my health is the most important thing, but he felt that if I focus on what makes me happy, then my body will recover. That was his sense.
Very reasonable.
And then he said, so what makes you happy? And I said, obviously, going off and doing this journey now. And so that journey I did then when I started by going to Jordan, then that was it was with him, with his support, with his blessing. It was like a project for the both of us almost, based on this premise. And that happened just as I finished my memorizing, and I was in a new climate and classes and joined this and do that. And that's why I feel from that moment till this moment I'm playing catch up. So that's why I don't think I did it, you know, in the very strong, slow way where you do the whole consolidation.
Could you lead Tarawih?
Yeah, it's a funny one. I would say if it's all I did, and I could have the whole day to practice, I would love that opportunity. That's
those people. So Tarawih is, for anybody who doesn't know this, is a special congregational prayer that Muslims do in the holy month of Ramadan, and normally there's the word that Sohail used with Hafiz means someone who's memorized, who's on hifz of the Holy Quran, and obviously this is a hugely challenging task. It's a very difficult thing to do, but there are many people who have done it. But of this category of people who are Hafiz, there are special ones, I think, who are able to lead a prayer in Ramadan, and that is because you have to pick up something. So you might start with the beginning, which is I don't know, Alif Lam Mim, etc. ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. So that's right at the beginning of the Quran, right? You have to start that and then end at a point, and then do the bow, which is what Muslims do in the prayer, and then come up and then start the point that you had stopped at 3 minutes ago and pick it up with the flow. And for me, if you said to me, of the things that you know or have learned, wrote in the Quran, start in the middle of that surah, it's like, whoa, I don't even know where the middle of that surah would be. And so for me, always the people who can lead Tarawih are elite. Like, they're, in terms of memorization and their kind of closeness with this holy book, those people are amazing. And I don't think I'm saying anything which is extreme there. I think those people have a special talent and a special place in the hearts of all Muslims, and they always have a very tough job, because if they do make a mistake in the recitation of the Tarawih, there's normally at least 3 or 4 other people who will go, no, it's this, and they'll speak up, and they'll if you're in a big mosque, like if you're in one of the big mosques in Mecca or Medina, it's very difficult for those people, because there's literally thousands of people who will correct.
And even if you just stop to clear your throat, they're all going to jump up to correct you. It's like,
even if
you can't breathe, you just want to keep going.
Just wait, whoa, just do it quicker. It's a hard job. It's a hard job. So tell us about Jordan then. Tell us about your life in Jordan.
Well, so Jordan, the original plan was to go for a year or two and then to go to Damascus, which was the I don't know, site of pilgrimage. I don't know what you'd call it. Back then, everyone was either, most people I would know who were going to do studies abroad. Syria, Damascus was the place. So that was my idea. And I had friends and a nice community. So I thought, let me start in Jordan before I go. But that move never happened. I ended up staying in Jordan for 12 years. It was way longer than ever planned or imagined. And I did 2 years of just studying. And then I did 5 years at an Arabic school, Arabic for non-native speakers, that had just started back then.
Yep.
A year before, called Qasid.
Right.
Which is now the leading study abroad program for Western universities.
Wow.
So if you go to all the top universities, if you name them, Oxford, Cambridge, Exeter, Edinburgh, go across to America, all of them, basically, the main center they deal with in the Middle East now is Qasid in Jordan. So it grew to great prominence. And at that time, I was it's a funny story how I started, but that stories will get too long now. But because I started off, the guy who runs it was like, this is a computer engineering guy. Why would I want him to be teaching in my school, right? I'm trying to get this as a legit, respectable project.
Yeah.
And there was someone managing it who really wanted to get me in. And then it just so happened that there was a teacher who started the same day as me, who didn't come to work for his first day of work. I don't know why you'd first day of work not come in. And I was there as like a general manager's assistant.
Right.
And I was told, you're not the assistant general manager, just to be clear, it's general manager's assistant. The ordering of words, I was impressed, was impressed upon me. Yeah.
Yes, this is the.
And but this general manager, he had a key eye to sort of develop, to give me that opportunity. So I'm very grateful to him as well. And he's become a dear friend and teacher in later years. And so he kind of just put me into that classroom. And obviously, alhamdulillah, I was like, the classroom was awesome. And they were all grew on to be prominent figures, the students in that classroom.
Right.
One of them went on.
Funny how things like that work out.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
One of them went on to be like a professor in an American university, and one of them went on to be a teacher in a Sira expert, and then one of them went on to be actually in the end like a partner of Qasid and also a prominent teacher.
It's really, and it harks back to what you said earlier around the people you have around you, your friends.
Yeah.
Once in a while, you'll be lucky enough to be in that perfect formative environment where there's almost like a seed bed of germinating amazing things, and it comes from one place. And I think if you do analyze the situation in like we suggested earlier, that what's happening around me, who are the people around me, and how they're affecting me, you might be able to identify that seed bed, and you might be very lucky to go, I'm going to hold on to this as tight as possible, because it doesn't happen that often. It doesn't happen that often.
I think it happens more often than we think as well. It's just, but you are right. It's just, what can I say? If there's thread,
times, places, and people that have to all triangulate at the same point in time in the same place for that to happen. I think that's. But
there's one thread that probably runs through my story, which I feel sorry for those who might be watching this, because I feel we're only halfway through and it's like been a very long time. So I don't know if people have logged off by now. But one thing that will run through the whole story, and probably runs through aspects of yours as well, I'm sure, which is just that since that moment when I was 17, 18, all of my decisions were really driven by a quest, which was purposeful. It wasn't driven by trying to do what everyone is doing. I was after something.
Right.
However you wish to frame that. And it's just, if you live purposefully, you will naturally be finding people who are likewise.
Right.
And if you are naturally finding people who are likewise, the probability is many of them will go on to do interesting things.
Right.
And so it's just, so it actually starts with you then.
Yeah.
It's about, if you approach life as a quest, you will find people on a quest.
Right.
And interesting synergies will be created thereby. And it doesn't have to mean because obviously people are in different stages in their life. You can't just take up and run off somewhere. I mean, that's all. Like I said, even my own story, it's all circumstantial. I'm everything happened because I was sick, for example. You know, if I was not sick, I would have a very different
at IBM and be miserable.
Yeah, you probably wouldn't want to talk to me, you know.
Yeah.
In this current moment. So I'm trying to say is we don't control all of these things. But, you know, but all I wish to say is wherever you are in life, wherever you are in your moment, you are not unable to have a quest. And at some stage, we all have to be trying to understand best. Ultimately, you know, there's different ways you could frame this really, but ultimately it's why we're here and what is our calling and what's the most that we can do in our life. And some aspect of that will always involve learning. So some degree of learning is always part of the quest, however you wish to frame it, whether it's the Arabic and the Islamic, or whether it's about social justice, you know, contributions, whatever it might be, there is a learning part. And so all of us have to have some devotion to learning, I feel.
Yeah.
And in some sense of how that relates to us and our place in the world. And then I think it's not coincidental that you'll run in with people who go on to do interesting things, and you'll be one of those people just because you've made your life directed in such a way.
Right. So I think the bit there, I mean, going back to kind of our foundations on this podcast, is about learning what those principles and practices are for success. And I think you've done exactly what my intention was, which is talk about something of your own. There's two things. Firstly, you need to have something you're aiming for. You need to have a quest. You need to have an adventure or a journey that you have in front of you. I want to do this, an aim, an objective. And I think the other bit that you kind of alluded to, which was you need to have a kind of a mind that you're going to be learning. I think that has to be kind of throughout everything you do, that you're going to have to learn, and you need to learn how to learn. And I think this is the bit that our schools don't do very well.
And that's where I think passion of love is where it has to start. It always starts with love. That's why it's not about us telling anyone how to learn. I learned that later in life. People will tell you, oh, if you can't memorize, there's no point doing it, being an ex-scholar. If you can't do this, no point doing that. If you don't do, you know, and then I realized later in life, no, it isn't really about that.
No.
It's about what's the kind of learning that you love to do. That's the kind of learning that you have to do. Because if you're not driven by a sort of love and passion, then you're not going to get anywhere. So our job as teachers as well is just to inspire. It's not really to tell people how to tread. Yeah. And it's not that our journey will be their journey. But it's if we can just give someone a spark of passion, then they will tread that journey, whether we're there in their life thereafter or not. And if we fail to transfer passion, then all this other advice on how to learn and how to study and where to go and what to do, it's not going to find its mark.
So there's a Bruce Lee film, and I can't for the life of me remember which one, but there's a Bruce Lee film where Bruce Lee's teaching this student how to do martial arts, and the guy throws a punch, and he says the punch was no good, and the kind of guy goes, well, what was wrong with it? And he says it lacks emotional content. And he's making an overly fancy kind of point.
I like it. Emotional content in the punch.
There's no emotional content in your punch, and therefore there's no emotional content in your fight, and therefore you're not gonna reach where you want to go, because emotional content is the thing which moves us forward. And it is, like you said, the emotional content that you speak about is love, right? And it's the one that I think we need to foster and grow within our community, but other communities as well, because without that we kind of flounder and go off in different directions. And
the other thing I'll add to your summary is it's not always that the end point is what comes first. Like so the way you summarized it was you have an end point and you have to commit to learning. In my point, it's in my own journey, this idea of I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, that kind of stayed for a while actually. So even in this moment, my quest was about learning. It wasn't about I want to be a scholar, or I want to change the world, or I want to solve X problem, or I want to do that. All I knew was at that stage, I want to enter this culture of learning. That was it. Right. And so there wasn't an end sort of impact goal. Right. And this idea of the end impact goal, remember I said anything I'll say to you is how I relate to this culture of learning.
Yeah, of course.
This
Cool.
there was a particular new journey for me that started about 10 years after I landed in Jordan. And that's the thread that brings me to where I am today. Whereas at that moment, the quest wasn't clear to me, other than I want to be in this culture of learning.
Right.
So just to say that it still wasn't purposeful in the same way it might seem like.
So
yeah.
There was a book that came out recently, and it's a funny one, and you may not be aware of it, by the American actor Will Smith.
Okay.
And very much bubblegum kind of autobiography. But the bit that I thought was, I was watching this thing on YouTube about him, and he said, he had a very difficult relationship with his father, obviously. Actually, not obviously. It's not obvious at all, is it? He had a difficult relationship with his father. Although he considered his father the most formative force in his life. And he said, one of the things that he taught me was he made him and his brother build a wall. And he's like, I was about 13 or 14 years old, had no idea how to build a wall, had no skills as a builder, had no idea what I was doing. And it was a wall that took them the whole of the year or the whole of the summer to build. And he went to his father and said, listen, I have no idea how to do this. And he said, look, there's one rule, only one rule. Concentrate on the brick that you are putting on top. Make sure it's straight. Make sure that it aligns with the bricks around it. Make sure that the amount of cement that you put in is the same. And that's all you need to worry about. Don't worry about how am I going to build a wall. Don't worry about how big or long or anything like that it needs to be. Don't worry about anything else. Just worry about the one brick. And at the end of that year, the wall was finished. And my dad came out of the shop that he worked in or he owned and said, now, boys, don't let anybody tell you that you can't do something. Just concentrate on this one small thing. And it feels like your story is very similar to that, where you were, I don't really know what I want to do, but I know what I really like, and I'm just going to concentrate on that. I've got a year, I'm going to learn Quran. I've got a year, I'm going to learn Arabic. And that's a very, whether you knew that or you didn't know that, it's a very similar story, right? It's really interesting.
No, hearing you say it like that definitely sounds, yeah. No, that metaphor is really, really powerful.
It's beautiful, right?
This is for sure. Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
That's a simple thing.
And so after the 5, so then I did for 5 years. Then I was what they called head of Arabic grammar, basically, at this Arabic school.
Right.
And then I wanted to do more Islamic studies side. So then I moved to what at the time was an online leader in online Q&A and then online education, which was a place called Sunni Path. Later, they changed their name to Qibla.
Right.
And so I was an online teacher for them, doing Quranic studies and fiqh studies, really. And it was halfway through that period where for me came, again, it will have its own features, but it's just, it was probably the beginning of a new journey for me. And it was many things happened at that time. You know what? You reminded me of things now. They all converged at that moment. So at one stage, yeah, I became critical of the sort of traditional studies that I was doing and teaching. Because these traditional studies, as I was doing and teaching it and studying it, what can I say? It was very two-dimensional and textual. I'll just say it like that for now. And I had come into contact with a teacher who just, I think he opened my horizons a lot. And he sort of combined a commitment to tradition as powerful as I had seen and wanted, but he combined it with this academic rigor and a sort of critical research. And that combination I found, what can I say, very enticing, very meaningful, and that determined the steps I took thereafter. But it came to me in a moment where I was also searching to understand, well, how do I relate to all of this tradition? So I went through a period where I said, I've given up on fiqh. So fiqh is this Islamic law. I said, I've given up on fiqh. I don't think this way that we're doing it is right, and what the right way is, I don't really know it. And I just told people, don't bother with fiqh, do other things, do tafsir. Because I always had two subjects I went between. Mostly.
Yeah.
One was fiqh and one was the tafsir, the Quranic studies. And I went through a period where I got quite into this Hanbali scholar called Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali. And he, I can't describe it in full, but I was trying to search for an understanding of religion which I could get from first principle, and it felt meaningfully connected. At that time, in my Ibn Rajab phase, there was I developed an emotional connection to the Salaf. The Salaf is a name for the early Muslim community. And I decided that, Quran and Sunnah, people interpret this way and that way.
Right.
But the religion of the Salaf is the religion of the people who received the revelation.
Right? Yeah, directly.
So I developed this emotional connection, if you like, that I like to connect to the Salaf. This is one thing. And I was searching to get a better grasp of how tradition works and what it really means to be part of a knowledge tradition. When you enter a knowledge tradition, what does it mean to be faithful to it? So faithfulness to a knowledge tradition has marked the last 10 years of my life, trying to grapple with this question.
Right.
What does it really mean to be true to a knowledge tradition? Because it seemed too easy to say, that's what the book says, that's what you have to do, and I'm not engaging myself in any way beyond that.
And that's not all, actually, who am I to say this? But at least
it's common sense. Yeah, it's common sense.
But it
can't be that is what that's tradition is about.
That's what the book tells us as well, right? It tells us to think.
Correct.
Right? It says, ponder upon my my words and my creation. So how can you do that if you don't think? Ponder means literally think about them. So how can you do that if you don't think?
Correct. And the other thing is, I started calling it inventing a lie in the name of God, or inventing a lie in the name of the authors. Why? So if I pick up a book and I tell somebody, this act of yours is haram or halal, or this prayer of yours is invalid, or that marriage of yours is invalid, and all my point is I've read the sentence in a book, and I've not engaged myself fully to fully comprehend the topic, the arguments, the reasoning, where this sentence came, how it relates to you now. If I fold all of that up, then I'm not sure whether this author would want me to say that to you today. Then in which authority am I speaking?
Yeah.
So I'm using tradition to give myself authority.
Yeah.
I'm not actually taxing myself to enter tradition.
Right.
This is the idea. When you enter it,
standing at the a small car.
You've gone choppy.
Tradition, but in reality, what you should be doing is getting into the water yourself and saying, "Oh, okay, this is what's going on." It's I think you're right. I think you're making complete sense.
So can you hear me now? Your voice went a bit choppy, just a little bit.
Sorry. Hopefully it recorded correctly, but okay. What I was saying is like it's almost like standing at the shore of this tradition, of this knowledge, and someone asks you about something from within that water, and then getting a cup and splashing them in the face and saying, "Yeah, this is what it says," but you're not in the water yourself. You're not thinking. You're not.
No. Yeah, there you. What a metaphor. Nice one.
Getting wet in any way. Really.
Correct. This is exactly it. And the question is, what does it mean to enter? What does it mean to be faithful?
Yeah.
And so what I found when my second return to fiqh with this teacher, his name is Dr. Salah Abul Hajj. In my second return to fiqh, I just found a paradigm that really captured my imagination within fiqh. Sorry, I don't know if you're getting me. Your connection doesn't look good right now.
I am. Yeah. Just checking. Yeah, I can hear you.
You okay?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, because your video went blurry and you kind of paused a bit. So when I came back to fiqh the second time, I just found within what I'm going to now call Hanafi thought. So Hanafi thought has captured my imagination for the last 10 years. So that the Hanafi school is one of the legal schools, one of the schools of law. And what I've realized and what I've been trying to grapple with is it's ultimately a system of reasoning grounded in a particular understanding of tradition. That's basically what it is. Right. And so it's trying to, and all of their books are full of argument. They're all trying to teach you how to argue in a very particular framing of what's the role of your mind? How do you relate to tradition? How do you relate to revelation? What is God's vision? What is God's plan, if you like, for society? It's moving you around this equation again and again and again. It's training you to reason in a very particular pattern. And so Hanafi thought for me was a full paradigm of how I relate to the Salaf, because Salafism is actually quite central to how it's understood as framing of tradition. So I found a relation to Salaf, which I was searching for. I found a tradition that was so committed to reasoning, but it was grounded in this, again, in tradition. So it wasn't loose, it was disciplined reasoning, but it was a way to reason through revelation. What I'm trying to get at is it was a whole system to understand who are you, who is God, and how do you live in the world. Wow. But it was a system. It wasn't just me trying to get a verse and trying to do something of my own. It was a fully fledged system embedded within legal cases. So it wasn't theorized, like here's the system. You have theories of it, but you wouldn't get the system like that. You have to go into the legal cases, chapter by chapter, topic by topic, and in each of them you're being thrown in reasoning about this puzzle and that puzzle, and you're thinking about society, example. Pragmatism.
So it will say something like X happened, and this man or woman went to this person and said, here is the problem that has occurred. Should I do A, B, or C? And then the Imam, the Sheikh, he will sit down and go, well, actually, here is my reasoning. Here's what should happen.
And I mean, even the most basic book of fiqh, that's what we skip over. The most basic book of fiqh that tells you about tayammum. If you don't have water and you can buy it, and they say, okay, then you have to buy it if it's for market price, for example. Within that, there's a whole framing of society and worship. The idea that people shouldn't be able to take advantage of you because you're worshipping. The idea that a normal market price, then you're maintaining your dignity. Okay, are you in tayammum? Do you have to ask someone for water? Say I'm traveling with you, I haven't got water, you have water. Do I have to ask you in order to be able to pray? So for Abu Hanifa, the answer was no, because my worship is lowering myself before God. It shouldn't force me to lower myself before you. It shouldn't be, please, I need you to worship. There's a whole framing of dignity.
Wow.
And worship, and then his companions will say, no, it's okay because water is ordinarily given, and so they're all talking about society and social values within tayammum, and all of the fiqh does this. And so what you get at the end of it is not just a simple principle of 20 principles of society, but you get a fully fledged argumentative view, really reasoning through about how dignity meets worship, how market meets responsibility, and
it does something very beautiful. Sorry, I'm going to interject here. It does something very beautiful. It links the self to everything outside of the self in a community, in a matrix almost, right? That the Western world continues to try and do, I think, and not quite do properly, right? Because the Western world, I feel, goes, what's good for the self 90% of the time, and then what's good for society maybe 10%, or maybe I'm being unfair, and it's not able to link those two things in a very coherent way. Whereas this system, this framework, gives you a way of going, well, you need to consider the self, but you also need to consider beyond the self in terms of God, community, or law, community, family, self, right? It's doing that thing again where it's saying all of these things are interlinked, and the focus of this fiqh or this law is to give each of those elements its appropriate value, which is actually fascinating. That is really deep.
What you've said summarizes anything I was about to say, which is quite useful.
Sorry.
Because because you've hit the nail on the head perfectly, because what you've summarized is what I felt at the end of these last 10 years.
Right.
Because what's happened is, to really fast forward then, I came back to England, I did a PhD. Within the PhD, I really had the time and the freedom to bring together all of these threads to propose what it's called a theory of Hanafism. And again, people will look at this in different ways, but really it's a system of exactly tackling the questions that you've talked about. How a legal tradition is actually conveying an understanding of man, God, and society. and how you enter that system and what you're meant to be, what you are able to do once you enter that system. So for me, it's that theory of what brings it together.
Yeah.
I was working with the legal commentaries and the legal theory, but it was just bringing it together to show that it really is doing this. It's not me saying it. These arguments are really grounded. Because when you look at some of these legal arguments, you don't realize there's a profound training taking place. It's not just for the sake of it. When I say argument, we think of argument as a bad thing, but it's just like a justificatory sentence is more profound than people realize, and that's what I've been trying to show in my PhD.
So here's what we're going to do. This conversation is fascinating and it's beautiful and deep, but I feel like we're only halfway through. So we're going to do part 2.
It's up to you, because what I'm desperate to say to everybody, I haven't said yet.
Exactly.
So either I can say it right now, though, in 5 to 10 minutes, and then we can do a part 2 if it comes and if it doesn't come. Because right now, there's something too important that hasn't come out yet at all.
So say that, and then I think give a summary of that, and then we'll go into it right at the beginning of part 2.
Because this is what I want to do, and then after that, people come, they don't come, we come, we don't come. But it's just like because there's a thread.
Right? Do it how the.
I can't though. I can't do cliffhanger here, because for me, stories are stories, and my life is no more interesting than anybody else's life, really. But I want to just get to what I've learned from it and where I am now, and why it's been a journey where, as I've been trying to grapple with understanding what it means to be true to a knowledge tradition, what happened was then after my time in Oxford, I became a lecturer at Cambridge Muslim College. That was a very formative time for me. I was teaching Islamic law really with a blank slate, with really smart students, really grappling with this tradition now in a very profound way, talking through all of the law, even the strange topics like jihad and hudud and slavery and sale, marriage, divorce and child maintenance and the zakat and the prayer, blood money, everything. And all of it, we're trying to do a framing. In the framing, we're saying, what did it really mean to those jurists? What do these institutions really mean in society? And by looking at their arguments, what are these various topics trying to, what are they there for? What are each of these institutions there to confirm or to affirm? And at the end of that, it just became very clear to me that all of the fiqh was about social institutions, all of it. And that's what why your comment was so profound for me, that the fiqh primarily is a vision for society. And that the sacred law primarily is giving you a map of social institutions that a community must construct for this vision to come to earth. Because the vision of the sacred law is not individual, it's social. The whole teachings of Islam is about coming together, finding common purpose, finding a sense of ummah, making the sense of purpose real, and then obviously institutions to make sure that we have justice, fairness, and we can flourish. And so the fiqh is the map of that. And this map for me personally is the da'wah of the Prophet, ﷺ, his civilizational da'wah, which is the fact that he left the world with a series of institutions. And those institutions spread in the world. And over time, they had a particular logic that over time, communities entered in and found a meaning joining this community, entering into this civilization. And then for me, what I felt at the end of that was for the fiqh community, the community of people who engaged in sacred law, individuals might be bookish and library-ish and all of that stuff, but the community can't. Because this burden of jurisprudence is a social burden. And that's why this community is ultimately a social community. And the purpose of the discipline is not to write and teach. Writing and teach is just how you maintain a discipline's continuity. But its purpose is to bring about particular institutions in the world. And that's why historically jurists have always been occupying a middle ground between society and between the political realm. They were always outside of that space, informing how the political has to function, how the social has to function, and leading a delicate dance between the two, so society can move forward in a particular way. So all I'll say right at the end of that is just that my current position I'm occupying now at National Zakat Foundation is a position I occupy out of conviction, which is that this is what this tradition calls to, is to bringing the institutions of the Sharia or the sacred law into the world. Now, all I'll say, the last thing I'll say here, is that this idea of social vision of Islamic law starts with salat. And so for me, ritual prayer is the fundamental social institution within the sacred law, because it leads to the mosque, and the mosque is the birthplace of the university, of the courthouse,
right,
of the spiritual lodge, and these, which in Islamic history led to great influence in Western institutions, which mapped onto these. And so what I'm trying to get to is the prayer led to the mosque, and the mosque has shaped human history. And we can do different discussions around that, but the prayer is the most important social institution. And that's why I believe,
beautiful. Yeah.
I believe the reason me and you are talking today about leadership and that and Muslims and all of that, I believe it's because people built mosques in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. Right. And then people went there to learn the Quran, and people went there and said, oh, we have a Muslim identity, not just an ethnic identity. So the mosque is identity forming. The mosque is ummah forming. And that's why all these great conversations we have about future and Muslims in Britain, what gave us that space to know that we have an identity called Muslims in Britain? It was the mosque. At least that's my contention. Anyway, we can talk about it, but that's my contention. The mosque is fundamental in identity formation and ummah formation. My belief is that zakat has, again, zakat, we have to serve zakat to complete this vision. Zakat within the sacred law is paid Muslim to Muslim. So it's not charity in general, which Islam encourages all the time. It's a specific engagement to build community, to build belonging, to have the sense that your kids are a duty on me to make sure that they're looked after. And so it's an ummah forming, community strengthening institution, not just charity in general.
Right.
And the fact that the sunnah is zakat is local, the idea is it's building our sense of belonging in the here and the now, that I have to know who's in need. I have to have a sense of, are people struggling where I live, and can they tap into our other faith services? Come to the mosque, come and have a lesson. The idea is zakat is meant to strengthen community through this duty of care to the people who are near. The brotherhood in faith is growing.
Right.
And so that's what I mean by this tradition of learning. I feel, for me, it puts on us a burden to create and develop a social infrastructure, so that the justice, the harmony the sacred law is calling for is realized within the world. In the classical fiqh, the idea is it's tied to the political, some figurehead, because it's hard to have institutions working in harmony without one.
Yes.
But what the sacred law and the classical jurists also speak about is, in the absence of the figurehead, the world still has to go on. And again, our classical conception of the figurehead was not so centered on the figurehead. It was society's institutions that had to be built.
Right.
And so for me, it's building a social vision of zakat throughout the country, which we all buy into, a system that we all feel part of.
Right.
I feel it starts this next journey for our community. The mosque started a journey. If we all feel part of a connected network of care because we're Muslims, it starts a new journey for us. A journey in awqaf, a journey in... There's a whole host of things which arise out of this sense we belong to a network of care.
Right.
And it's a whole other sense of what it means to belong to a faith community. Again, what you've hit on the head. There's a social meaning that it means to belong to a faith community.
Yeah.
I think zakat has to hit that on the head.
Yeah.
And it's not about exclusion and us versus them. It's not about that.
No.
It's that being in faith means being in community.
Yeah,
that's all the sacred law says.
It's almost being a part of a club, and when you're in that club, it's your responsibility to look after other members. It doesn't mean that it's not your responsibility to look after people who are not part of that club, right? You still have to do that. And
the door to membership is always open, because that's why the 5 pillars are so interesting. They're all social.
Yeah.
And the Shahada is telling everyone that you can't judge people. If they say the 2 words, they're in.
Yeah.
And so the Shahada is telling the community, you've built this wonderful infrastructure. Now, don't you dare keep anyone out.
Right.
It's just a word and people are in.
Right.
And so that's the idea. It's all a social vision, and everyone's welcome, but we have to build it nice and make sure that it works. And so that's for me. Then the Zakat journey. Now we can talk in the future. I just want to make it clear that this culture of learning, it ends up for me in a social commitment, where
Brilliant.
this learning has to come into the world. That's all I'll say. So
that's amazing. That was a beautiful conversation, and I think what we're going to do is part 2 very, very soon. We'll put some time in now, and then we can finish off the conversation of your journey. And you know, this was beautiful. It really appreciated it, and I hopefully you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did.
No, I always love talking, and I especially enjoyed talking with you. Apologies if I went on a particular end or not, but I just wanted it to be clear that, you know, this work, the work I'm doing at National Zakat Foundation, is a work of conviction.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I hope people would follow the journey.
And
see how it relates to them. Again, specifically the work of Zakat.
Emotional content in there, which is really important, right?
Oh, did I punch properly?
Yes, that was a correct one. So what I was going to say is, let's do this. Let's put some time in the next few days, and we'll go from the point of, right, let's now rewind slightly, go back to the point that you're still a teacher at the Sunni Path, which changed to Qibla, was it?
Yeah.
We'll go from that point, and then you come back and you understand a little bit about the Hanbali tradition. You move into the Hanafi kind of tradition, and how did you go from there to go, right, I'm now comfortable to jump off there and then move into this new position? And then we'll go over kind of what you've been doing there for the last few months and what the next steps are, and then we can make that second part a little bit more about the getting people to donate, inshallah, their zakat to NZF.
Yeah, 2 things I'll say on that summary. One is, I didn't technically become Hanbali. There was a particular writer whose attachment to Sunnah and Salaf based piety influenced me a great deal.
Right.
And on the last part, when I'm talking about donating to NZF, I don't, you know, what I'd like to call people to is an understanding of the duty of zakat and the community care that we have to develop.
Right.
And so I invite people to join the journey with us.
Yep.
And I'm not in the business of an either or, you know, I don't want people to feel it's either with us or against us sort of idea. So it's not I'm here for the donation to NZF.
Right.
It's the idea that I want you to join this journey with us. And I call everyone to give a part of their zakat in the UK. That is definitely what I call people to.
Yeah.
What the part is, you can determine. But what that's going to do with that part, it will start your personal journey. Then you'll start realizing, well, what's that little care that I owe? What's the care that I owe here? What is it? And what's it doing? And what's the impact? And what are the needs? Because people have this sense that if it's a benefit system, there are no needs. And that's just because they haven't started looking.
Yeah, they haven't looked.
So it's not about, I'm here to take all of your zakat. I'm here to invite you to think about our sacred, the burden of sacred law, if you like, and to join the journey with us. And yes, to give some of your zakat for sure, because that's how really the journey will start for you. So I just wanted to say that.
Brilliant. So I'll tell you what, I'll drop you a text and we'll work out when we can do the next one. Inshallah, next week before Ramadan would probably be ideal for both of us. But listen, that was amazing. That was really, really good. I think that we had a beautiful, good discussion, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you. Jazakallah khair.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it too. Take care.
Good. And that was Dr. Sohail Hanif. So we spoke about the kind of how he got from being born in Iran to spending time in places like Libya and Jordan to eventually ending up in Oxford and Cambridge. And now he's the CEO of National Zakat Foundation. I'm very, very excited to see the direction in which he takes the NZF organization. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you could subscribe, that would be amazing. Comment, definitely like. I think that was one to like. And this is a special shout out to my friend Anan Ahmed, who has done wonderful work by spreading news about this podcast via word of mouth. So I really appreciate it. Be like Anan and tell everybody about this. Thank you. Bye.